So it looks like we are all assembled. And where we left off, basically, was I had sent you all an email where I thought that Julian was right about the yogurt sample. And I was going to explain why I had come to that conclusion, which was basically whether we should. The question was at issue, as I recall it, was should the sample was otherwise clear except that the Faya, if that's how you pronounce that word, Faya yogurt was not clear. There was enough that you could tell it was Faya yogurt, but the details of that were not clear. Yeah. And the question is whether we should call that skillful. And I was arguing at the time that the answer to that was no, and Julian was arguing that the answer to that should have been yes. That's sort of what I remember of the background. Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
And in contemplating that, what I decided was if you think about Steph Curry, you all know who Steph Curry is?
Yeah,
basketball player, maybe the best shooter in basketball. And if you watch him shoot when he launches a three-pointer from 10 feet behind the arc, and he puts that in, you say, "Wow, that was really a skillful shot." And when you watch him take a shot from 10 feet out, and he makes it, you don't say, "Well, that was really a skillful shot." But it was equally skillful, I think. That this is what is sort of the new thinking for me. It seems to me that Steph Curry is a skillful shooter, whether he's shooting a 40-foot shot or a 10-foot shot. It might be that the audience would say that's a really skillful shot at 40 feet and not say that at 10 feet. But Steph Curry is equally skillful at 40 feet as at 10 feet. Mm-hmm. And so if Steph is shooting, then you should say that was a skillful shot, because we know from watching Steph Curry shoot that he's a skillful shooter. Mm-hmm. Even if I were out there and I were to take a 10-foot shot and make it or miss it or whatever, you would say, well, he's a really skillful shooter, because he's not. And so what I think now about is that I think that we have established that Kerry has some skillful in visual imagery. She has visual imagery skills, and one of the ways that demonstrates itself is that she sometimes blurs things that are not just inattention at the edge of the world, the edge of the visual world. They're not skillful, but there are pieces of unclarity in the middle of an inner seeing, and we would sometimes call that skillful. It seems to me if they're and this is the finally gotten to the end of the story here. It seems to me that if she is partially clear and partially unclear, even if it's about a detail that doesn't strike us as being skillful, we should still give her credit for being a skillful, for this being a skillful seeing. And I'm guessing that's more or less in the ballpark of what Julian was saying, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
But would you say that any seeing that has some degree of blurriness or lack of clarity would then count as skillful?
No. Okay. What I think is that the lack of clarity has to be somehow delineated. Mm-hmm. Like when one of our samples is about picture frames. Inside the picture frame is not clear. The picture frame is clear, so it's not just like she's blurring as she gets farther away from the center of the attention. She has patches of unclarity.
Yeah.
And anything that has a patch of unclarity, I think, should probably be called skillful. Whether skillful is the best word for that, I don't know. Maybe it's more specificity of unclarity or something like that. Yeah. But I think skillful is probably in the ballpark.
I mean, yeah, I see that case over here, like that there are samples that are like where blurriness or lack of clarity is used to do more. But here from, like, we had multiple samples where she's talking or thinking about branding or logo design. And here it seems like she conveyed just enough to see that it was clearly this kind of yogurt, like it had the red and blue logo or whatever. But she didn't feel the need to spell out the letters individually.
Right.
So that's why I thought it was skillful.
So I'm compelled by that, and we should change that to skillful clarity.
Okay.
So is there anything more to say about that, or should we continue on to?
I'm good on that.
So Mel, I think I convinced you the other way around the last time around. Have I convinced you back to this position?
Yeah, you convince me every time.
Yeah, it's a dilemma.
Very compelling. No, I think that makes sense to me. I mean, the only thing that it gives me some hesitation in the Steph Curry and sort of this example is that it feels like there's some element of like, I don't know what the word I want is, but like, what is the word that I need? Anyway, but like, not in bringing some knowledge of the person to the sample, but I guess that's what we're sort of doing each time. But in terms of it feels a little bit editorializing or like bringing too much knowledge along if you're going, well, Steph Curry's a great shooter, so anytime he shoots, it's skillful, or like anytime Kerry's a bit blurred, it's skillful. Do you know what I'm trying to say there? I'm not being very articulate.
Yes, I do, and I think it's the word skillful that's getting into trouble there. I think if we were to call it localized unclarity, then I think you wouldn't have that problem. We could say, well, this is the picture frame was localized unclarity, and the yogurt was localized unclarity, and the boy visitors next to the bra person would be a localized unclarity. All those things would be localized unclarity. And then out of the set of those, we could say, well, this is...
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's just me hung up on a word, which is ridiculous. But I think you're right. Even just that little distinction was better in my brain. Yep.
All right, so I don't know what I did, if anything, to deserve that. It's I get a heads up, new recording track created.
Yeah, that's fine. I just got to edit it. They're getting harder and harder to edit, but that's all good.
Oh no.
Just because we got all the screens now, and then
true.
the hard drive's full.
Oh.
So I'm going to share I'm going to try to share my screen again.
Yep.
I'm going to share my screen. The entire screen. And now can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just entered a 1 here, and we're going to change this title from Skillful Clarity to, what did we decide it was going to be?
Localized clarity?
Localized unclarity.
Localized unclarity. I like that too, because with skillful we were wondering, well, is she doing it for a purpose or is it just random? And then that involved speculating
Right.
what her purpose was.
Speculating,
Right.
that's
Which I
sort
think
of
is
the
what-
word I wanted earlier, Julian. Yeah.
Right. It takes the
Feels a bit
speculation away.
speculative. Correct. It's too early, my brain's not working properly yet, apparently.
Early.
So this is now the heading. Does that seem reasonable?
Okay.
Yeah, that feels better.
All right. Then we are ready to press ahead, and we were halfway through day 8. And in day 8, we were at 8.4. And in day 8.4, I said half a sensory awareness, and nobody else agreed with that.
All right, I've got to read through this and make my screen bigger because it's so small.
So I could make this bigger, make this text bigger. It's 130.
I'm trying to pull it up on my screen too. Oh, right, if the red
So
is
the-
sensory awareness.
Yeah, the question is whether the red...
I thought the red was experiential, but it wasn't about the redness of the red. It was about the unchangedness of the edits in the end. But I
In the
guess
green-
I would have still
in the
thought
gr-
0.5. Like 0.5
Yeah,
would be
I
okay.
agree. I'd give it a 0.5.
0.5 is happy on. That reflects what we said in the green meeting.
Yeah.
All right, 0.5 for that. And then that would be of color.
Oh, I also put 0.5 there. I just forgot it before.
And then it definitely was seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Mel just overlooked that. Okay, we good with that?
Yeah.
And we were all right with 8.5.
Good.
And 8.6, the question was about feelings and whether they were really experienced or half experienced.
I thought this was a clear feeling.
Wait, what am I reading? 8.6.
So the question is, what led you, Mel, to think of this as only a
What did I do?
0.5?
0.5, and everyone else did a 1.
Say that
I mean,
again.
sure, I
missed
don't really feel strongly about it.
it. Whether it is, the question is more whether there's a conversation to be had about why one would call this a feeling or why one would only halfway call this a feeling.
Yeah.
And one possible answer to that is, I don't know at this particular moment. It seemed like the right thing at the time, but I don't remember. Or there might be some sensitivity that you have that the rest of us could profit from.
Yeah, I think there is some degree of that, of sensitivity that I have. Like, I think this is very relevant to how this feels like I'm bringing too much of my own perspective here.
Okay.
Because this feels like something that could be sort of close to my experience. So I just felt like, I don't know, it didn't feel as strong as the capacity that I know is possible for, like, something that I would be like, oh, that's definitely clearly feeling a lot. I don't think it's anything particularly grandiose on my end. I think I was just like, yeah, there's some feeling there. That's all. I can give you a 1.
So I can buy all that, and I think it does. This conversation does highlight the fact that inner experience doesn't fit clearly into categories. We can say that there is a category feeling, but that's really pretty arbitrary at the edges. Whether this is a 0.5 or a 0.7 or.
Yeah, I think that's all.
And then whether there's some other than semantic speaking going on.
Oh, yeah, true. Well, see, I think that. Oh, I guess I was doing the
You.
but I don't think that's really reflective of where we've agreed that category goes.
I think the is a retrospective verbalization.
Yeah.
She was not ing at the moment of the beep. She was saying, if I want to tell you guys about what this experience was, it was as if I were feeling, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Just a blank for here. And then whether there was seeing, pretty clearly seeing.
Obviously is. So that's just from...
In the guy's face.
Gee, that wasn't my best sample, was it?
Well, if one were to say that the object is to reach agreement, then the answer to that question would be yes, it wasn't your best sample. If the object is to spawn discussion, then it was a good sample.
Thank you.
And we're going to have the same thing about here. Something about 9.1.
Feelings.
To be honest, I think feelings, like, these haven't come up that much. That category hasn't come up that much for Kerry, and I feel like it's a category that I have some sort of issue with, for exactly the reason that you've just said, Russ. I think I just find it it's like so wide and ambiguous. So I'm just prefacing this chat with that.
This is interesting. I could see some case for some feeling lurking or being part of or reacting and saying that's not my experience. That it's not just a totally neutral thing. Like, I don't think there's a whole separate feeling.
I think reading it right now, I agree. Like, if we were doing our sliding scale thing, there might be a 0.2 there. I don't think it's enough to even award a 0.5.
For me, it's something like a sliding scale, but something like I don't think there's any... I think we all agree that she was surprised. There's no disagreement there. The question is whether... And there's no disagreement that surprise affected her in some important way. She was laughingly saying, she was reflecting that surprise. The question was whether she experienced the surprise. And the answer to that is it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I agree. This is a 0 for me now.
Okay. So this becomes a 0. And we're done with sample 9.1. Feelings are very often hard in that regard. And I do think it's important if you're trying to understand experience, you try to keep those things separate, because there are some times when you can feel surprise and it's directly in your face. I am feeling surprised, and other times when you're just expressing it without feeling.
Which I think is, almost always the case with Kerry too. Like, there hasn't been an overwhelming amount of distinct feelings, but
2 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
2 out of however many samples we've got.
It's just like
I've been feeling.
The Staples one was the strongest from what I remember.
Which one?
I don't remember what the other one was. The Staples looking at the guy's face and just disgusted and fear.
So 9.2, it's this going to... Mel thinks maybe unsymbolized thinking.
All right. I could see how it might have been, but I don't think the interview was adequate to uncover that.
Yeah.
So this is where Mel gets her 0.5.
It's the wonderingness. Again, I'm happy to die on my... I was going to say die on my sword. I think that's...
I'm happy to go back up to 0.5.
Are you? I was going to give you 0.
In the green meeting, this is... If this had been if we had written this as 1 question mark, we would have said 0.5 for sure. And this is one of those where from my point of view, it's not so much about counting as it is about recognizing that this unsymbolized thinking is phenomenon may or may not be present. It's sort of hard to tell, and this is an example. So I'd be happy to count this as a 0.5.
I'm happy with that too.
Okay.
At least it lets us know there's something
Right.
interesting about it to go back and look.
In the unsymbolized thinking realm. And there are not very many unsymbolized thinkings. Even if you count this as a 0.5, there's only one other place where there was possibly one other.
Yeah.
Or maybe two half places we could look.
Yeah.
From what I remember in the interview, she was saying, well, there wasn't a clear thought with words. So I was thinking, well, maybe there was a thought, but without words, it was hard to not be suggestive. And there, yeah, the interview had a lot of uncertainty.
So, was there speaking?
Is there speaking?
Looking at 9.2,
Yes.
was there speaking?
She says, where's Lake Geneva? Yes.
Yeah. Just rolling out.
I just missed that.
So now the question is whether this is now a 0.5 or a 1. There was speaking. We're in agreement that there was speaking going on.
Oh, yeah. But
The question is whether that was experienced.
Well, didn't we have a different category? Don't we have two?
Yeah, speaking outside of awareness. 'Cause we used, I feel like we started doing it where we would put a 1 because there was speaking, and then we would also put a 1 for outside of awareness.
Yeah, I don't think we're too clear about that.
But
So
then,
what are we going to do this time, and then we can go back and
So
clean it
I
up.
think that's what we've been doing, haven't we, Julian? So, like, yes, there's speaking.
well, then we
so it goes
switched to
that.
doing, I think we occasionally did a 0.5 and then a 1,
Oh.
but I don't know. Maybe just a 1 and 1.
So there's a lot of 1s, not very many 0.5.
Yeah, I think we were doing... Wait, can you scroll up again? So in the speaking category, oh yeah, 1, there's some 0.5s. There's a 0.5 when there's a 1 there. There's a 1 when there's... So it doesn't look like there's consistency on that.
Yeah, you're right. But I think we agree that there was physical speaking, but just rolling out, maybe not experienced at all.
So if I were to think about it today, I would give it a 1.
Okay,
agree.
a 1 and a 1 for outside awareness.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, so where's that one? Outside awareness?
The green
To
one.
the right.
Ah, right. Yeah. That's our sort of category for words rolling out. And then what's this?
And speaking other than semantic. So the question is whether there were just meaningless words rolling out. And that doesn't seem like meaningless words to me.
I
So this
think
is
that's
probably
before
my-
we've had the category of
Yeah.
words rolling out, perhaps.
So this is going to be a blank.
Yeah. And then what's this?
And then is there any seeing? And
Staring at the text.
Wonderingly staring at the text that said Lake Geneva. Yeah, that feels like seeing to me.
so why did you and I say a 0.5? Seems like it's pretty clearly a 1. Don't know. All right, onward to last two.
Mm-hmm.
9.3. I say there's inner speaking, but you all don't. And you all say there's inner seeing, and I don't. So the chances are good I made a mistake here.
Yeah, it's the page
9.3.
page.
So this is inner seeing, and I put it as inner speaking. So this should be a blank, and this should be a 1.
Yep. And then
And now this is our skillful, what we used to call skillful, now we're calling localized unclarity. And Mel and I say there is.
I thought this was more of a nothing beyond. What's the... Because everything is clear, right? think there's anything unclear in this one.
So I agree with that. So I don't know why I would have said 1. So I'm willing to go take this down to a 0.
Yep.
You agree with that, Mel?
Yep. Well, I just feel like when that category started, it also was reflecting when things were smaller and things like that. Like, see how it says it's small, not life-sized? I think that's where I came to that. If that was the skillful element.
All right,
But
that's interesting.
the way we've defined this category has sort of changed.
I wonder if unusual perspective, that could fit for that.
No, but is an unusual perspective when we're talking about, like, her literal perspective of the seeing?
Yeah.
Right, I wouldn't
I
call
wonder if
this...
something that's small or life-sized or big could count as that.
Well,
Right.
that we've definitely had previous examples where we've been including that in this definition of skillfulness, have we not?
The smallness thing.
But I'm hearing what you're saying.
So I'm in my head. I never was clear about what she meant by small. Whether it was the refrigerator that was small, whether it was the image of the refrigerator that was small, whether that was small because it didn't cover up anything else. I never could figure that out.
I thought it was really clear.
So-
It's just that the fridge that she was innerly seeing wasn't a regular sized fridge. It was a smaller version of a fridge in her head.
So you're breaking up. Your audio is breaking up for me.
So more that the whole scene was small. Okay. Well, we could just leave a note that says small.
I think that's right.
Hang
So
on. Yeah.
about-
So I can you hear me or not?
We can now, yes.
And nothing changed. I don't know. Yeah. So I thought it was just that the object that she was seeing, in this case the fridge, was much smaller than what she knows the size of a fridge to be. So she had skillfully made that smaller than necessary. And I feel like there are other examples of that where things have been much smaller than what they are in the real world, and therefore there's some sort of skillful aspect to that. Because then also, if you look at, I didn't remember this before, but if you look at our localized unclarity skillful section, that now feels dangerously close to our other a category which we have, which is clear, at least in part. So I feel like the lines there are blurring, because now I don't have a way to categorize this skillfulness that I think is present in making the fridge smaller. Or am I overcomplicating things?
It's interesting that those categories are more similar now. I don't know what to make of that.
So there's a lot there. So this inner seeing seems to me to be clear, at least in part. This should be a 1. Why I didn't say it as a 1 before, I don't know. So it seems to me that this cell here ought to be a 1.
Yeah.
You.
I agree with that.
And then the question that Mel is raising about whether there's some kind of a skill of making it small, I could get behind that. That may be why I gave it a 1.
I could get behind that too, but I feel like we redefine that to be more about blurriness,
Correct,
and
yeah.
less necessarily about skill. But I could see, like, I don't know if it's another code or just a note in the notes column or something, that there's something interesting about making it small.
Well, now I feel like our new term for it just doesn't, it's not broad enough in a sense. Like now, it's like, well, skillful describes that better because then it incorporates that again. But I didn't like that word before.
I could make one more case for unusual perspective as a category.
Okay.
Like, it is the case she sees it not how you would normally see it if you're just looking at it. Like here it's smaller, and in the yurt sample, it's like she's physically behind her, like she's seeing it from behind. But I feel like although they're different, they're both, you can make a case for both being skillful and both being about seeing things in a way that's different from, just looking out at the world.
So this, I think, is an example of the pie can be sliced in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
I personally would reserve unusual perspective for taking a position that is not where my seeing usually is.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've got not with Kerry. Well, Kerry had the one example, the yurt example, that her she was seeing the seer was behind her. That's what I would talk as an unusual perspective. And I've got samples where somebody is seeing the room from as if they were up in the corner in the corner of the room, looking down on the room. That is what I call an unusual perspective. Mm-hmm. So it's the question. The question is whether unusual perspective refers to the seer or to the thing seen. And in this case, it's more the thing seen, and in the yurt case, it's more the seer. Okay. And those are very different from my perspective.
I agree.
Well, do you think a new category would be worth it? Like change in size? Because there's just that one other sample with the dog, I think. With the dog with the flower crown, the dog is also smaller. And, one of her dad is smaller too. But we never fully figured it out.
Is it me being too literal here, and like more often than not with inner seeing, the seeing of a real life thing is gonna be smaller, and I'm not actually gonna use up all this space in my inner seeing world to have a life-size fridge or a life-size dog, and like that it's actually not really relevant that they're smaller, because perhaps that's a fairly normal part of the phenomenon. I don't know, I don't do it, so am I making too much of a thing that's not really part of the most important thing?
But some of her scenes were lifelike. Like she described it like being there, it's around you, you're in it. And some of them weren't. Yeah, the three of them. The first one with hiking, sample 2.1. And sample 7.5 with the dog and the flower crown.
Yeah.
She talked about that being, the dog being smaller. I feel like if we made a category for that, like size shift, either a category or at least maybe a note, in the notes column.
Yeah, maybe a note column. The problem with the smallness, from my point of view, is so in 2.1. This is 2.1 that we're looking at now on the screen. Is she seeing a small dad, or is she seeing her dad and then in some natural attitude ways saying, well, compared to the rest of this stuff, if this were the real world, then my dad would have to have been small. I don't think we could figure that out, at least on day 2. And I'm not sure we could figure that out even in the refrigerator sample.
Do you think that's generally a hard thing to try to figure out, or? Because I'm kind of wondering, like for the yurt seeing it from behind her, like we accepted that this wasn't metaphorical. She sees it this way.
It was not metaphorical. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's not metaphorical.
Right.
So why do you think the smallness, like to take it less literally? Or do you think there's more risk of natural attitude seeping in for that? Like, mentally seeing it has to be smaller.
And I think I think the taking of the yurt perspective is weirder, but in some ways easier to describe unambiguously. This perspective is not from here. This perspective is from back there somewhere. Whereas I think the size of an image is just problematic, because if you think of it as an image,
yeah, then it makes sense. It could be big or small.
Then it makes sense to be big or small. So the question, so I think I think it's difficult. So am I seeing like a model refrigerator? Am I seeing like a miniature refrigerator? Or am I seeing an image of a refrigerator, and the image of the refrigerator, it's a real life-size refrigerator, but the image itself is small? I think those are hard to sort out, because the image is such a ingrained natural attitude.
Yeah, but as someone, if I think the opposite here, right, clearly I have no capacity to do any of these options in my head. So if we don't categorize it in some way, like, it's interesting to me to know the differences where sometimes it was this real life size thing and other times it felt distinctly smaller or just not the size I see it in real life. Like, that's interesting as a phenomena to me to know a little bit about that, as opposed to if we don't categorize it at all, then I have there's none of that referenced for me, and because I can't do that in my head, I have no idea that there's any difference sometimes.
So I think that's fair enough, and it is part of Kerry's skill that she has a lot of different ways that she can innerly see something. Sometimes it makes sense to call it small, sometimes it's not. And that's different from Mel, who doesn't have that skill, or doesn't use that skill very often anyway. And so whether we want a new phenomenon for small, I don't really care about that. I think it comes down to when we want to describe Kerry's inner seeing, we're going to want to describe it in a way that is informative to somebody like Mel, who doesn't do that kind of stuff.
Correct. So that's where I think there's some skillful aspect to it, but it doesn't fit into what our skillful thing has now become. So perhaps it does need a new category as much as I...
So maybe what we need to do is put this back to skillful clarity. Or put this back to skillful. Put this back to skillful imagery. Including localized unclarity or indeterminate arrangement. How does that grab you? Or size?
Sure. Bigger category.
Yeah. It feels broad, but it's important. And I think that making a new category just feels like getting too in the weeds. So, yes.
And then we would agree that this is definitely one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are there any other ones that we wouldn't have? Maybe this one here?
Yeah, that one may be a 0.5.
0.5.
The dog with the flower crown, 7.5. The dog was smaller.
What did we do for that?
I mean, 0.5 too. What else? What else is small? Just do a search of small.
All right, we good about that? Number 9.3?
Yeah.
On to 9.4. We just got one cell left, where Mel says something was incorporated into reality. Oh, this was the yurt. Incorporate into reality in a mashing up sense, as opposed to a incorporation sense.
Like it's incorporating reality in the scene, which is taking.
Oh yeah, it's like a
places
reverse
she's been.
incorporated reality.
Yeah, it's kind of reverse.
This is using
also
a
is
piece
that-
of real. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, but then is that also fraught with danger to view that as that way? Like, well, in the dog sample, it's her flower crown from her childhood, so that's a part of that reality incorporated. Like every seeing is probably taking something from somewhere, so is this a slippery slope?
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this should be a
I'm
blank.
fixing myself. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it's too dangerous. It's a really nice, obvious example of that, but then I think that just opens a whole lot of problems.
So now we have removed all of the differences of opinion,
Wow.
and what we can see now by looking at the numbers is she had a lot of inner seeing, 19 out of 40 some samples.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like however many samples there were. The first sample starting with 7, 40, 39 samples maybe, 38 or 39 samples. Half of them involved inner seeing.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
And inner speaking over a quarter. And sensory awareness.
Fair amount.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But more important than the numbers is that this map now gives us, if we want to talk about inner seeing, when we describe the phenomenon of inner seeing, we want to incorporate the kinds of inner seeings that were seen in these samples.
Mm-hmm.
And when we want to talk about inner speaking, we're going to go back and refer to these speakings. And then when we're describing those phenomena, we're going to see, well, the phenomenon of inner speaking broke down or didn't work or whatever for this sample and this sample and this sample. Which is the next step for Kerry to describe her experience. So basically we have now done as good a job as we are capable of, I think, jointly, of coming to terms with Kerry's phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And now the question is, if we want to make that available to somebody else, or if we for example, if we're going to put Kerry on the web and we're going to have a summary of what we found, now we're in a position to do that as best any people can possibly have to characterize Kerry's inner experience. It seems to me we are now in that position. And the way I generally do that is now I would task a student to write a draft of Kerry's inner experience, and then bring it back to the group, and then we would polish it and call it done.
Nice. It is very good. Like, even just, top line looking at those numbers right now, like at the totals, just casting my eye over them, it is very satisfying to be like, yeah, that does feel really reflective of, like, yeah, it's mainly inner seeing, and there's quite a lot of inner speaking, and then there's this really present, skillful element, and very often her inner seeing is really clear. Like, you're like, yeah, this does feel really reflective of Kerry. It is cool. We're getting to the bit that I want, which is conclusions.
Is there a part where we're meeting again with Kerry and presenting this, or does that come after?
Well, I think we ought to write it first.
Yeah.
And so Julian, do you want to take a crack at writing it?
I could take a crack, sure. Writing description. Is there a, like, just as long as it takes to adequately describe what you say, or?
So the task is to say something like, the most prominent inner experience that we saw was inner seeing. Mm-hmm. And then to describe what inner seeing was. Most of the time, like what Mel just said, most of the time it was clear, and much of the time it had this skillful aspect. And by skillful aspect, I mean this and this and this. Mm-hmm. So that basically the object is to put into plain English what we know, what the three of us know, with pretty much agreement, probably not exact agreement, but pretty much agreement, so that somebody reading it who doesn't know Kerry and who doesn't know us and doesn't know the process would understand what we're saying.
Okay.
And that means giving enough examples so that you can't just say, well, partial of the time it was skillful. You have to spell that out and with enough examples so people can understand it.
Okay, some examples. Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in trying a description.
Okay.
Also, I'll have time starting next week. I wanted to start working on some short videos about this project. Maybe each video focusing on a couple samples, or but yeah, I can do that in tandem, because I think writing it out would also be a good way to just spread it.
So I think I'm trying to figure out what I have to do to stop sharing here. There's a thing that's called stop, but I'm not sure that means stop sharing.
Yeah, that does it.
Yeah, it does.
That is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I do think that the writing it out is in large part the same kind of an exercise as what we've just been going through here, in the sense that it forces us to rethink phenomenon and how they're related to the words. We use words and we think we know what they mean, but other people don't. And do these words fit faithfully to the phenomenon? We had a long discussion about whether skillful was right and decided it wasn't. Then we decided it was. And that will occur in the writing as well. And and the task is not to take that personally. It's not like it's wrong or right or whatever. It's that we're going to try to refine it until we're satisfied with it.
Get an understanding. Yeah. I can get cracking on that. I was also wondering about next steps in general, and about doing this kind of analysis thing for Mel samples. And it's farther in the past, but I think it still would be interesting. What do you guys think about that?
I think there's something to be said for that.
yeah, I think it would be helpful from a broader project perspective for me to have this level of detail and analysis on my samples to then bounce off Kerry to then help me go to the next step of putting something together. So I would be interested in that.
So let's see what. Okay, so let's see what we would have to do about that. So we need idiographic. Did we ever write idiographic characterization, personal idiographic characterizations of Mel samples?
No, and we didn't do the green meeting. I think we
would have to
description of each sample, but we should do the green meeting step.
So we probably have to revert to the green meeting for Mel.
Yeah.
Go back to where we left off, which would be green meeting for Mel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mel, would you want to be a part of that, or come back when the process is done?
I guess be a part of it. I don't know. I don't have strong feelings either way. Do you?
I think it would be interesting to get your perspective. I think, as you said before about Kerry, as Russ said, like, you might not be the authority about some things because you might be attached to thinking of yourself as a certain way or a sample a certain way, and memory can change. So I think those are interesting conversations. I think it's really up to you and your time availability. I mean, it is a long process.
There's no perfect way of doing DES, I think. So this is what we would be deciding, is that we would think that this would be an interesting, worthwhile thing to do, because Mel's experiences are pretty much in the past. A fair amount of water over the dam since we've seen Mel's experiences, which is not ideal. So that would have been better to have done the green meeting back right at the end of Mel's sampling, but we didn't. So now I think we're going to go back and we're going to do the best we can for a green meeting, and Mel might as well be there if she wants to be there. And if we get halfway into the green meeting, we might say, well, that was a mistake, either to do the green meeting at all or to have Mel there or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of going through the motions. It's a matter of, do we think, in our best judgment, our best joint judgment, do we think that we are advancing the ball towards an understanding of Mel's experience? If the answer to that is yes, then we should do it.
I think it would. And to have you there, I think that would. But I ultimately just think it's up to you.
Yeah, I'm interested. I think I agree with all of that.
Well, do we want to finish a writing of Kerry before we get to that, or do we want to schedule another joint meeting for the three of us, which could then be either a green meeting for Mel or a discussion of the write-up?
I find with
write-up discussions are very often done by email, passing documents around, tracking changes and whatever.
I'm fine for scheduling something now. What with the time zones? In a week?
A week from today would be Thursday the 13th, our Thursday the 13th, which is Mel's Friday the 14th.
Works for me.
I can do that.
That's good. Now, would you do an hour later? Would that also be good?
I mean, I'm definitely open to an hour later. It gets me an extra hour sleep, but I'm conscious that it gets late for you.
No, but it's fine for me. Yeah, fine.
So 45 minutes later than we started today would be 1 o'clock on the hour for me.
10 for me, and then that's 8 for you. Should we do that?
Yeah. Are you okay with that, Julian?
Yeah.
Then I will gladly take that.
Yes. What should I even call this? I'll just call it a DES meeting. That's
Yeah.
what we talked about.
Well, you should probably put in there as a green meeting, because that'll remind me to have the documents together for what we need to have.
Okay. All right.
But it might not be a green meeting. We may change our mind if we have something to say. And in the meantime, when you make a document, Julian, you should just email it to us, and then we will pass it back and forth with track change comments in it until we agree.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
So,
Fabulous.
I have
Fabulous.
lost us here. We must be here somewhere. There we are.
all right. I'll stop the recording.